Welcome to Data Points.
Good job, man. Good job, man.
My name is Ryan, and I'm the president of Pinpoint Guam, and I'm ready to go because Felix, the hype man, just got me ready. Like the hairs on the back of my neck. Actually, I'm calm. I have this thing on my shoulder, and it kind of like it relaxed, right? Yeah. Felix, you are the Chief Client and Commercial Officer for SIY Global. What does that mean?
That means that I oversee the firm's global business and all the commercial activities and also all of the strategic client interactions across our business units.
And when we talk about client interactions, the reason you came into the fold with us is because we were a client.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason why we're a client is because increasingly we realize that understanding the internal structures that motivate people, make them feel scared, make them feel small, make them feel angry, are important to understand so you can navigate this thing that is the workplace culture and achieve the results that you would like to achieve. So I wanted to bring you on to kind of talk about your journey and some of the insights, maybe not specifically, but just in general, in a broad sense, you know, because I think that the journey that we went through would parallel many other journeys if they engaged in the same process and practices. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And it's probably helpful for the audience to understand what SIY Global is, right? And so SIY Global is an EQ-powered leadership development firm based out of San Francisco. But they were born at Google, grounded in the leading neuroscience and mindfulness practitioners and research, and pressure tested by engineers and right brain skeptics across every single industry. Back in 2006, an engineer, one of the original batches of engineers that essentially was tasked to grow the organization, was tasked to put together something that's going to help these engineers that are under high pressure to be resilient, to innovate, and to continue to grow and not burn out. And he brought in a Tibetan monk. He brought in mindfulness practitioners. He brought in Daniel Goleman, who is the godfather of emotional intelligence. And he put together this program called Search Inside Yourself. And this was a deep dive inward, knowing how to fortify yourself as a leader, how to manage your emotions, how to pay attention to your bodily signals so that you can influence the outcomes as a leader in a way that's how you intend, right? So fast forward, the program was hugely successful. Essentially, they attribute it to a lot of the growth in the organization.
And an engineer designed this.
An engineer designed it, yeah. Right, this is important information. It's good call out. And it was so popular that they spun out into a nonprofit, a public benefit corporation called SIY Institute. Okay. And from there, SIY Global can spun out to kind of bring it all the way to the corporations across the world.
So SIY Institute is the thought leadership piece, and Global is the execution piece.
Not necessarily. They still do programmatic work, but mainly for like nonprofits and government entities. And typically we were in the corporate wellness side of the house, and what we have essentially created was as a public benefit corporation that's bringing all this 20 years of practice and goodness to corporations so that they could make sure that they are in developing the humans in their charge in a way that matters to their communities.
Why would I trust an engineer to engineer emotions?
Well, if that's a good question. You can trust that they've been skeptical of every single second of it, right? So, at the end of the day, it was really more designed to be more effective. And I'll tell you why this matters. At SIY Global, we firmly believe that emotional intelligence is the foundation of effective leadership. You couple that with some mindfulness practice, and you got yourself a mechanism to really help manage those emotions. At SIY, we have seen the leadership development industry pour so much attention into skills and behavior development, and they've got it all wrong. And yes, it's helpful, because feels very good to be able to learn some skills. What happens is these programs and models are taught in a very calm environment like this, right? But the reality of it is that leading on the field or in the flow of work does not feel this way. It's a constant pressure. You've got to make decisions in the fly. You have to be agile. You have to prioritize. You're dealing with all different types of human emotions happening every single day. So what happens is when your brain feels a threat, right, the stress hormones pick up and you no longer have access to your prefrontal cortex that actually has all the information that you've learned in these sessions, and it goes right to a habit, to all the rehearsed habits that you've had. And that's when mistakes happen. And that's when, between stimulus and response, if you know Viktor Frankl, The Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, there's a moment where you could decide how you want to react so you can influence the outcomes. And so we are upstream. We believe that emotional intelligence is a capability, not a skill or a behavior kind of focus. Those are outcomes. Yes, those are important. But the way that I look at it is imagine an iPhone. And on the iPhone, you have all these apps, and you're just getting all these apps that have wonderful capabilities to help you manage your day, manage your time, be a more effective communicator, whatever. But what happens when your operating system is 3 updates behind? It doesn't work. You don't have access to it anymore. Emotional intelligence for us, and the way that what we've done with the group, is get upstream and work it as a capability, upgrading their operating system so they can actually not just hold more, but be more effective with more.
And that context, it matters too, because in identifying your own root cause,
right,
you understand that there are root causes behind the reactions that you're facing, and you can mindfully get to that root cause, or at least mindfully steer.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's an important point, because what it is, it's and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's called the perception box, and this is actually a concept that is woven into our portfolio. But the perception box is the premise is that everybody's walking around with these perception boxes around their head, and it's made up of their beliefs, their life experiences, their emotional history, and those are stories that are always being played, right? And depending on what life comes at them, those are the reference points. And so, to your point about the root cause, most of the time these are triggers of traumatic stories, traumatic experiences that form your belief system, that form your judgment, and you replay those, right, to essentially respond to the world. Most times it's automatic.
So, okay, well, what do you say to the VCs out there who say, I only invest in messed up founders with trauma, founders or something?
There's opportunity. I'll say that. No, I mean, I think that's also kind of risky, right? Because you're almost, you don't even have to, VCs that go into a volatile, leadership or culture, they have to fix it before they spin it up for the next stage, right?
But there's different coaches for different times.
Of course. And but I think it's important to know that these stories, and we went through this with the group, the capstone. So we did a full year journey.
Yes, we did.
At the last week, we talked about the perception box and how to recognize and be aware of your perception box, when it's contracted and when it's expanded, and how you influence that. And I'll give you a little snippet, for your audience for free. But, when it's awareness, being aware of your perception box. The second is signals. Your body, your body is a kind of a beacon for all signals going up to your brain, right? And then it starts to kind of turn into an emotion or some sort of a data point. That's what emotions are. Emotions aren't right or wrong. They're data points. And so what from there, then you start looking at, how do I manage those signals, right? Some of them are external, like the sound of a car, sound of a baby, the other person's voice. And then how do I shift that focus and signal to me about what am I feeling? How is my gut reacting to what you're saying? And just like a spotlight, you can't put a spotlight on two different things. But you got to be good at doing both. And we teach that in the course room or in the training. And then last is about, what do you do with that? What do you do with those signals, right? Do you revisit some of those stories that are no longer true? Yeah, there are so many people that walk around, and I'm looking at you, that are reliving stories that were true 20 years ago, but because they haven't revisited that story, and they're forcing themselves to keep reading the chapter that's already been written instead of creating a new one. Yeah. And that is habitual, and it continues to essentially be in the way of effective leadership.
It's a pattern. And if you can't name the pattern, if you can't explore the underlying emotion, you're doomed to repeat.
That's right.
Perpetuate the cycle that you're already in.
Right.
So when you walk into a room to do the work that you do, what is kind of the first thing that you're reading? What's your take?
The first thing that I, as a facilitator, or really anyone that's going in to kind of send a message, is I got to check myself. I got to make sure that I'm the right channel. I'm tuning in to where my intent is, because people will feel that. Right? And so if I walk in, I first make sure that I'm aligned with what I want to make sure that I'm going to share with the group. And then I look at all the array of people. Most leadership development is either mandated, like you have to do it, and it sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes.
Or it's voluntary, right? And that means is you're going to get way different ranges of people. But my job is to kind of identify the ones that are like, and luckily there was none of that, by the way, in the group. At least not that serious. But part of it is, this kind of work, talking about emotions, it doesn't make anyone feel like excited, right? And the ones that need it, right, don't want it. It's the ones that always are open and like, I want to learn, I want to do this. They're the ones that are always the one in the front row seat, right? So I look at how open they are first, and then kind of over the course of the time, try to pull them in, try to plant some seeds of like curiosity so that they understand, like, look, there's something I can get out of this for me, which is important. It's not just for the company. They are a human that has multiple facets and identities across their life.
And it was dynamic, I would say, because you read the room and then you shifted, you made some tweaks based on how people were responding and kicked us out of some room.
I did. You want to talk about that?
Well, sure.
Well, I mean, this is a good one. And first off, the first thing is, anybody from Guam, or anybody from here, they'll be like, who this guy? She doesn't even know who we are. Like, this guy's from like States. He doesn't know. And then I have to let them know, like, look, I'm a local boy from Santa Rita. I was in the jungle almost all the time. And I understand the culture. I think most leadership, people who do these things don't understand that piece, or maybe can't translate it as well.
I agree.
That's the first thing is that. But the second is, you try to create a environment of psychological safety, so that people can really get the most out of it, because we're talking about things that are, intense and, deep-seated, right? And so I kicked you and the other and other leaders out, only because I wanted them to let their hair down and then build that culture, that team culture as a leadership group, and be able to have meaningful conversations that really lead to behavior change and capability upgrades.
And I saw that. And even in terms of the responses, it was very quiet. It was a very quiet room. So
Right.
you're trying to lead the way a little bit, but then
Right.
it just becomes you
Right.
saying,
Right.
and is this my session or is this everybody?
Yeah, but it's called it's space, and this is something that we that every person, not even a leader, but when you're trying to make a connection with somebody, you got to create space for them,
Yes.
right? Some people are processors internally. Some of them are like they think out loud, and you got to create space for them. That's not easy to do when you have very loud and opinionated leaders that want to demonstrate and model.
Oh, oh, Felix.
It's not loud. You ain't loud.
Judgment.
Tell me more about that reaction. That's an interesting reaction. Is there something more there that we need to talk
I
about?
guess maybe the self-deprecation and
There you go.
might get there, Felix.
Okay, no problem. Oh, well, I'm here.
Thank you. No, so with that, you did, I think, also understanding people's systems, right? Because people respond to things differently. People,
Sure.
you spoke to it, process things differently. So some people tend to rationalize, some people tend to intuit, and then those styles don't really mishmash because the person intuiting feels that they don't want to have to explain themselves all the time, right? And the person who's rational just want to understand. So it's just that perpetual dynamic, and then if you don't understand and don't accept and you don't reflect and give space, then you run into the wall.
Right. In this group, what was interesting is it was very obvious that everyone had respect for each other, right? That's a great start, right? Just, hey, I see you, I respect you. I think what was different, and this happens across the board, is there wasn't a lot of opportunity for everyone to be in one room and actually just be the space as a group, to essentially translate experiences. And to your earlier point, there are so many different characters, and some of them didn't even know each other. I mean, like literally didn't, like, hi, oh, that's, and that's not a fault of the organization. It's just like, if you think about what you're trying to build, if you're trying to build a leadership bench, which is what that is. So these are high potential, leaders of the organization that you're investing in. I mean, that's an impressive investment over a whole year. That's pretty commendable, especially here on Guam. And when you look at how many people had so much to teach in those classrooms, it's not just the facilitator or the content. It's the content that's really opening up translatable skills and experiences and building essentially bonds that are going to serve the organization in more dividends than you probably even bargained for.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. I get it. So in the offing of that, can you speak to the movement you experienced in terms of where we started and where we finished, and some of the spots where they're a little banging against the wall, more so transition. We talked about transition.
Sure.
People feeling certain way because we're in a time of a lot of transition.
Right.
New tools are coming in, AI, you don't have 100% understanding, and there's a mandate to incorporate them, and maybe you just don't understand how to do it, and you feel like you're being tested. Or some people step up to say, this is an opportunity, and some people see it as an opportunity to fail versus an opportunity to succeed.
Sure.
Can you speak to kind of that experience? Because I think that's happening across the board.
Yeah, it is definitely not unique to this group. What was very obvious is that there was a lot of change happening. There was a lot of, the systems were being all new. The growth is exciting. Don't get me wrong, and I think that was shared across the board, that there's a lot of good investment in the organization and capability. What was not very clear in the beginning was, what's my part in that change? And for anyone listening that is in leadership, it's the human part of change is the hardest one and the most critical, because nothing happens successfully if the humans in that process are neglected, because they're trying to figure out where's my place in this transition?
Yes.
Right. And it's not that there was an omission of like, it was just change was happening so quick. This happens across every organization that I've been working with in the last even 4 years. The rapid amount of change and complexity, right, our brains haven't even caught up.
But that's the environment your approach was forged in, that startup environment, that transition environment, that pressure environment, right? So in that, can you tell me about, respective to how people internalize these changes, how have you seen generationally the workplaces change for Gen Z versus Gen X, and what they take and what they give and what their motivations are? How has that evolved?
Yeah, I'll go macro, and
Sure.
Again, I'm not an expert in generational nuances here, but I'll just give some observations, and then I'll kind of bring it to the group that we just did, which was really a phenomenal thing to witness. So generationally, even the last 10 years, we've seen in the country, 5 generations living under one workforce roof, and every industry is experiencing this, right? Nurses, old nurses that have been in the role for 30 years, get a MSN new nurse coming in that
snapper,
right? Yeah, and they're protecting that knowledge, and how do you create that trust where where that senior, that long in the tooth nurse practitioner doesn't feel threatened that they're going to be replaced by a younger person or even AI, right? An example too would be a big, large trucking company that I was working with a year and a half ago. All of the founders were retiring off, and all of the younger, kids, that next generation was coming in, had a wildly different approach to what business looked like. And I'll tell you what that is, because it came into the discussion with the group. It's the definition of work has changed.
Okay.
By generation, right? If you look at the generations, maybe us and above, like it is very often you see that work defines me.
That's my identity.
There's definitely not what and that's not a bad thing.
No,
I think this is something we have to be respectful, right? Because I think we've showed them what happens when you make it your identity.
Well, Gen Zs are trauma kids.
They're not trauma kids, but they're learning from us.
Yeah.
Right. They're saying, look, I don't want to be that guy. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
He's like
the bad example.
He's got like acid reflux, and I mean all this stuff. He's just not.
He lost.
It's not healthy. It's not a healthy balance, right? Work-life harmony, not balance. And when you look at the younger generation, they want meaningful work. Mm-hmm. That's commendable. They also want a whole human approach to what they do. Now that's not easy, right? So I remember talking to a couple of CHROs. This was in San Diego, and the question was, where does the line stop for organizations? Does it stop when they leave the work? Because the younger generation wants it to go beyond that, because their identity is not work. They're still a whole human being with multiple facets. And this is why this work is important. This is why it resonates so much with this group, was these skills that they're learning are life skills. These are skills that would help their relationship with their boss and their spouse and their children and themselves, so they can show up for everyone that matters to them. And that's different. That's a different approach to why this stuff matters. Because let's face it, we have the highest suicide rate with kids under 14. We have where the anxious generation, mental health is on the rise. Not a lot of resources for that, especially here in Guam. They're dealing with way more than just work pressures, and they expect that kind of viewpoint. And I expect, and I think that organizations need to evolve past the old models, because or else they're going to be beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists.
And I see that. And I see the workplaces becoming more their community in a lot of ways in terms of the whole human thing. This is where I go for a lot of different things. I take a lot away from it. Is that accurate, or am I off there in terms of scoping?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. But I think what's omitted in that is like, what does performance look like?
Okay.
Because you still have a fiduciary obligation.
Well, yeah, she'll fire you if you don't do the main thing.
But there's a balance, right? It's like, you can expect, this is the thing, you can't expect somebody to have the same definition of what work-life balance looks like as you, right? And I think there's some tension there, obviously.
Right, and that's where I wanted to ask, where do you see that friction manifesting from on a team when you have these generational differences and you have these different POVs and different motivations? Do you think the friction comes from like how they communicate stress or the expectations, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, this is good because we came to a moment. It wasn't part of the program, by the way. It was just an opportunity.
Sure.
I was like, you know what? I want to call an audible.
Okay.
Yeah. And we in the group, there was 16 people in the group, and half of them are the younger generation, and the other half are been with the organization for 30 plus years or 27 years or whatever the thing. And it was a great opportunity to say, hey, I'm looking at the younger generation. What do you wish the older generation understood about you and your relationship with work? And they shared it in a very safe environment. It was phenomenal. It was the first time a lot of them heard their perspective. What does that tell you? No one's asking, right? The other way is true as well. I said the same thing. Okay, all right, they got that. The older generation, what do you think the younger generation misses about your generation and how that matters? And they shared some really great insights. Some of them were, about PTO. That's a big one, right? So PTO and time off and unplugging, right? And measuring outcomes, not process. And all those things are not easy. It's not a one-way street there, but it's just creating space and dialogue. I think that's what's missing, and I think it's because people don't know how to do it.
So what were the things? Paraphrase, right? I think
sure
you probably would have gleaned some insights from that interplay.
Yeah. I think the misunderstanding in general, which is aligned with the rest of everywhere that we work, we have a multi-generational experience in our portfolio that that people are using. The overarching theme is work identity, and knowing that there is a balance. The younger generation enjoys their protecting their well-being, their sanity, right? And then the older generation is like, hey, well, I remember I just kind of pushed through it. I had I was going to the jungle and my leg got blown off and I kept walking. I kept and it's like, those are completely different examples and probably more graphic than you probably would like. But those are stories, again, right, of what your expectations are. Nobody, and this is across the board, is really sitting down and going, what does balance look like, or harmony look like? And, what does empowerment? And that's what it comes down to for the younger generation. Empowerment. What comes for the older generation is value.
Okay.
Those are the two main things. Empowerment, give me the opportunity to succeed and the clarity to know what those milestones look like. And then for the older generation, it was more like, I still have value. I can teach somebody. I have value here that no one's accessing.
Mm-hmm. Huh. So when you're in a situation where you're leading a team, is there a difference when you're in the business versus outside the business?
give me a little bit more into that.
Well, is there a different way to lead when you're side by side, shoulder to shoulder, you're an operator versus I'm overarching, I'm strategic, but I'm not in the weeds of the business?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And again, I think those are shifts. It all depends on the kind of industry that you're in. I mean, I'm head of client work. I actually have clients myself, right? Because I want to be able to go through a experience like my people in order for me to understand how to improve it, or where our competitive advantage might be. So, but there is a different level of shifting, to your point, like capabilities. When you're in a high strategic mode, right, which is like in the overseeing kind of the business, on top of the business, those are where trends and narratives come out, where you can then operationalize. If you're side by side with your people, that's building culture.
There.
That's building culture. That's showing them that, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself or that I can't model.
What do you think the new expectations are going to be for leaders coming up in this world of technology and movement and all these moving parts?
The reports from McKinsey and Deloitte and all the research that's coming out, and in fact, the World Economic Forum stated that the number one skill of the future is going to be human skills or emotional intelligence, right? Dealing with people, because the AI has essentially democratized the transactional, kind of the non-strategic pieces. And what that means is they're going to be they should be more collaborative in the creative process. And that means people have to talk and interact with each other, right, to get the best outcomes. And all of that is, the human skills aren't going away. In fact, it's you should double down on it. If that's that doesn't unwind you, right? It's like, how are you operating under stress? How are you managing change? Actually, is it Deloitte? I forget which firm posted that it was no longer the just the manager as a point of engagement. If you have a high engaged manager, then they're like, you're good. Your retention is okay. It's now how well do you trust your leader in managing the rapid amount of change that's going to happen.
I see.
And that's a completely different thing. So it really is about managing pressure, making good decisions on uncertainty. How do you build trust? Connecting with people and understanding their triggers, systems thinking. This is another thing that we're seeing even currently on Guam is there's a whole lot of changes happening infrastructurally, right? What does that mean for the structure in your brain and how you're managing that? Right, so that you got to think in systems. You got to think in ways that's not going to. Now that you have all that transactional stuff that's easy to do, like, where does the rest of that work go?
Right.
It goes into building better systems, actually going and having better like level 2 thinking or more complex ways or solving more complex problems. And that doesn't happen overnight.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get it. So if you were going to assess, how do you assess? How do you go about assessing the room?
Assessing the room when you deliver, or just in general?
Well, I guess so. At the end of the journey,
yeah.
What is your hope? What is the takeaway when you go through this in terms of outcomes and future facing?
Right. The hope with this work is being able to not react, to be able to manage yourself in a way that allows a pause so that you can attach the right emotion to whatever you're doing right? So that you can get the best outcomes. My hope, and I think this is what we accomplished, was we helped these leaders be able to identify in themselves where they're holding themselves back and be able to look at data or emotions as data and then be able to quickly check their own stories and adjust it so that it actually serves them better. And then one of the things I think I'll end with this analogy of, it's like a river, right? You've got this river flowing and there's a whole bunch of, free logs and debris going down, and you're just observing it. And your job is to decide which one you want to pick out and pay attention to. And as a leader, that's not easy, because most people look at that river and pick up everything that's coming out, and they're not able to really deal with that. But if you know that it's not yours to carry until you decide it's something that you want to react to, that's when you've got power. And that's what I think we've been able to essentially instill in some of these, in the leaders from the CEI group.
And I think that's important, that statement, what's yours to carry. And because it's a choice,
right?
It's a choice, and
right.
it's a realization, and it's an acknowledgement that it's not a fault thing. It's a fluency thing,
Sure.
and a management thing. Am I wrong?
No, it's both, right? Because management's still a necessary skill.
Management of your emotions.
Yeah,
not management of the person.
That's right. It's management of your emotions. But also it's acknowledging what emotions are there, right? Because you can't manage what you don't know.
I struggle to name them.
Right. But that's one of it, is like there's different variations. Most people go from like happy to angry, happy, sad. And there's variants underneath it. And this is something pretty good. I'll make another analogy if you don't mind. Imagine, there's a rider and an elephant. The rider is riding this elephant. The rider is logic, and the elephant is emotions. And under no circumstances will the rider overpower the elephant just because of sheer size. But you've got to appeal to both. And if you can't control the elephant, you at least give them some guardrails. But you need to know what that elephant is and what those tendencies are. And those are stories or trigger moments of experience in your life that you replay every single time in the background that influences every single decision that you make.
Right. Because if you write the story, it's your story.
That's correct.
Not necessarily the data.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so you're telling the story, not reading the data. And you're correct. A story to answer to the data, to make yourself, not to make yourself do anything, just to manifest your story. Right. To facilitate or empower your story.
Right. Right. Yeah, don't cry. Dry your eye.
But for me, I think that I've really seen the evolution of the approach over time.
Good.
And then the insights at the end when we close it out. Right. When you brought some of these insights that we're talking about now, the idea of pass-fail we talked about, the idea of the intergenerational perception, the idea of the relational stress, the idea that neither side knew or understood what was important or not important to the other side.
Right.
But through the exercise of that, you realize the whole person, as you say, and you realize all the motivations, and maybe they're not for you, maybe they're not justified, but at least there's data.
Right.
And from that data, we can come to our own conclusions for ourselves.
Right.
Relative to that person.
Right.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And I think if we just left even this discussion to say, like, everybody is walking around with this box, this box of experiences that do not look like yours, and just being curious to be like, I wonder what's in that box. Even just that sense of curiosity would change the dynamic of that engagement, right? Because you're either contracting or expanding this box conscientiously, and you can work on that skill. And if you're talking to people you care about, I had a conversation last night with a couple of really good friends, and it was just a simple question: can challenge a story and rewrite beliefs like that.
That's real.
What experience in your life was the most formidable that shaped who you are today, that you would be completely different if you didn't experience? And it got really emotional, and it got to a point where we had an opportunity to put it on the table and say, is that still true? Is that story still true? And it isn't.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't.
I wasn't there for that day.
No, it wasn't. It was actually a private conversation.
Sure.
But, those kind of conversations about understanding someone's experience, and not say trauma, because it wouldn't be trauma, it's just experiences. And ask them a question because you're curious and you care. That's what leaders need to be doing with their people, is where are the things that matter to you? Like what is there stay conversations? Everyone, they call it different things. But, are you having meaningful conversations with your team? Because if you're not, then they're looking somewhere else.
Should you have meaningful conversations with your team like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I in my team, because I've got a team that has different functions, right? I ask them, I go, what energizes you about what we do? Tell me, what's your story? What kind of human is on the other side of this screen? And what should I know about you that makes you come alive? Like these are like, those are
their jaws drop. You're just like, what?
Yeah, it's because who asked those questions?
Right.
Right. Because
yeah.
Because I care. That's the thing. It's like, if what is Zig Ziglar saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Yeah. That's a true statement.
It is
here, but yeah. So I think there's a lot of beauty in kind of what I've seen, and what I'm very proud of is the people who have gone through this journey, right? Were vulnerable enough to bring to the table things that they needed the stories that they needed to work through, because they wanted to be better for the people in their charge. They wanted to make, they knew that their other people's lives are in their hands, and because of that, they leaned into the things of discomfort,
right? And
to see them find their way when there was a whole lot of change and a whole lot of uncertainty, to be able to hold on and actually get them a North Star, them to find their own North Star in that process. That was a chef kiss.
And that was a key takeaway for me too, to the idea that they took away their own personal motivating factor, and
right.
There was a direction that was pulled out of the exercise and is there for them to kind of look at.
Sure.
And walk towards and open to.
Yeah. What I mean, I think if there was a quote, and I don't know the person who quoted this, but a summary quote would be, a bird on a branch is not afraid of the branch breaking because its confidence isn't on the branch. It's in its own wings to fly. And a lot of people have these wide, beautiful, strong wings. Mm-hmm. And they're just so afraid of the branch breaking.
Right. Yeah, and that's mindset.
That's it.
In so many ways, and that's what you.
Carol Dweck's work of growth mindset. Sure.
So when you speak to other business leaders and want to tell them why they absolutely have to focus on this, what's your value statement? Go. So when you're giving your value statement, in terms of speaking to other business leaders, saying this, if you're going to invest in anything, this is probably the most significant and important thing you're going to invest in for the health, future, and safety of your team. Why is that? Because that's what I'm hearing from you. And why is that?
I'm gonna tell another story.
Perfect.
Because I think it's important, and I share this because it is at the crux, the responsibility of the people who lead others. Businesses are people; they're made up of people, and leaders lead people, and ergo lead the community, right? But this story hits home because there's a reason why the most deaths in a week is on Monday, because they go to work stressed, right? It is true. I think it was like 73%.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Of people of workforce deaths or workplace deaths happen on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big problem, right? But there was a story, actually a hematologist of 20 years. Forget the name of the guy, but he studies blood, and he wondered. He's like, I wonder if I can see in the blood, whatever happened externally to the patient, right? To see if the signature was the same,
right?
Marries to the external trauma. And so he looked at 1,500 ER patients across his local area, and he saw everything from snake bites to car accidents, people in a coma, really, really everything, the gamut. And what he found out was it was shocking. He said, you will never find more damage done to a human body than somebody who's just been through a major emotional event. Someone who has lost a loved one, lost a child, or a major divorce, which means we are all physical. We all physical or emotional. That means we're all emotional beings having a physical experience on Earth. And organizations, if they don't teach their people how to manage the stress that they're putting on them, they're inadvertently hurting them. Yeah. So this kind of training is not just about productivity. You're going to get that as an outcome. What you're getting is a human that can manage the stress you're putting on them in a way that gets them to thrive and be able to be more for their families too.
Responsible stewardship.
That's right.
Of your team.
Right.
Giving them some emotional support for all the stuff all the walls that you're asking to run through for you.
Right. Don't cry.
Yeah. Of my team
here. Yeah, you love your team.
They're good. They're good
people.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyways, Felix, I really appreciate you coming down and sharing your approach with us. It's been really a great journey, witnessing and experiencing for the little bit of time that you'll ever be in the room. But I feel this has been a session, and I think what you're talking about is segmenting, right? A lot of times you have big teams, so you do like a one tranche and then the next and the next, because the important thing is continuity of effort. Everybody in the organization has to speak the same language. It doesn't work just to work one group. Everybody has to raise their level of fluency and incorporate it in the process. And it is a cultural thing. And it has to be a cultural thing to be able to understand and navigate those emotions. So I appreciate you giving us the time to kind of learn a little bit and get some insight. So pleasure to have you on Data Points, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you thank you for having me. If I do a closing statement.
Yeah, no, right on. If you want to close out, this is anything to say to the audience, parting words, please do so.
Guam leaders can compete with anyone. And I believe that fervently. I think that we have unique experiences here, being on an island, being on in such a remote place in the world, with unique challenges that have formed resilience leadership. And I 100% believe that just being able to manage these emotions and what we're talking about here, and taking that jet on a freeway into the sky, and you can compete and run around circles anyone in the U.S.
I believe that, and I appreciate you sharing that with the audience, and I look forward to seeing you out there, empowering others with this information, knowledge, and skills. Thanks, Felix.
Thank you. All right.